it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit this pretty textured lace dishcloth. This is a wonderful pattern for beginners. We're going to simply make a garter stitch frame, and then we're going to be filling the center with a very easy 2-stitch lace pattern. It's only worked in one row that we'll be repeating over and over, and it makes this really wonderful texture that's perfect for a dishcloth. The fact that it's also lacy will also help your dishcloth to dry quicker too. We've also added an optional hanging loop made of some Icord, and that will make for a wonderful way to hang your dishcloth as well. I will show you towards the end of the video the option if you want to leave it off and just have a regular traditional dishcloth, or if you want to add it. So I'll give you both options later on in the video. So let's get started. The finished dishcloth measures about 10 inches by 10 inches. Yours may vary slightly depending on your tension, but it should be roughly about 10 inches by 10 inches. I made this a very large, generous dishcloth for all of your kitchen needs, but this would also make a wonderful spa cloth as well. And the hanging loop would be perfect for hanging it by the basin or the tub or something like that. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. A ruler or tape measure is helpful if you're measuring as you go, like I often do. You'll also need a pair of straight US 8 5mm knitting needles. And if you wish to add the optional hanging loop onto your dishcloth, you'll also need 2 US 8 double-pointed needles as well, the 5.0mm size. If you want to skip the hanging loop on your dishcloth, the straight needles are all you need for that. The yarn that I'll be using is called 24/7 Cotton from Lion Brand Yarn. An extra special thanks to the folks at Lion Brand Yarn for providing the yarn for this tutorial. This is a 100% mercerized cotton yarn, and I'm going to be using the mint colorway. That's color 156. And if you want to learn more about this yarn, especially what it means that it's mercerized, please check out my Yarn 101 that I just did on the 24/7 cotton yarn. So this color is mint, but I'm also going to be later on in the video, I'm going to be finishing up and doing the last part of our tutorial using the mauve color yarn. So it comes in lots of colors, and again, check out the Yarn 101 to see all of those colors and learn a little bit more about this yarn in particular. If you need to substitute yarns, cotton dishcloth yarn works great for this project. Any kind you like, your favorite. So let's get started. To get us started, we're just going to need to start with the straight knitting needles. The double pointed needles we'll put aside for later. I'm also going to leave our mostly finished dishcloth up here handy so we can kind of use it as reference. And we're later going to be switching off, and I'm going to show you how to finish your dishcloth using this piece here. So basically our dishcloth has a garter stitch frame or border around the edge. We've started with the garter stitch, and we're going to do the sides. But the center part of our dishcloth is a really super easy lacy stitch. And it's only going to be yarn overs and knit 2 togethers to make up that lace. So it's very, very simple. And this is a great project for beginners if you're ready to kind of depart from regular knit stitches or purl stitches all the time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use the Longtail Cast On to cast on our stitches. We're going to be casting on 50 stitches. So for the Longtail Cast On, you kind of have to estimate the yarn that you'll need to pull off of your ball. Now, if you have a preferred way of casting on stitches, please feel free to use the method that you prefer. There's lots of ways to cast on. So what I'm going to do is just estimate a length of yarn, and you're going to have plenty. See, this one is already finished. You're going to have plenty of yarn left over on your yarn ball if you only use one ball. So you could probably get another dishcloth out of that. I'm just guessing on that, but you could probably at least get another one. If not, then you could do like a sort of a color block, which is a great way to use up yarn leftovers. Okay, so we're going to cast on 50 stitches. So I'm going to go nice and slow if you are a beginner knitter, which I know a lot of Flux folks want beginner knitting patterns. You guys request these a lot. So I'll go nice and slow so you can kind of follow along with me. Okay, I also have separate videos on the Longtail Cast On and the knit stitch as well if you want to practice a little bit to master those. So what we're going to do to begin is to put a slip knot on our needle. I just have one needle in my hand right now. So wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your needle, bring up that loop and tighten. Now this is our first stitch, okay? So now we have a piece of yarn that's connected to our yarn ball over here, and we have a piece of yarn that's our tail. And I made this super extra long just to make sure. I have lots of yarn to spare. So what we're gonna do is as it hangs, it sort of makes an upside down V shape. So what we're gonna do is take our index finger and our thumb and come in through this V and kind of pinch it down with our pinky at the bottom. Again, if you wanna see a more detailed, very slow version of the Longtail Cast On, check out my other video as well. So then what we're gonna do is take our needle in our right hand and come up under our thumb and go around and through the finger and then bring it back through that thumb loop. We're gonna do this a couple times nice and slow. Again, we're casting on 50 stitches, so if you know how to do the cast on, you can just keep going. Once again, hold it the same way. It's gonna make kind of a diamond shape. Come up under the thumb, go around and through the finger, and then come back through that thumb loop, okay? We now have 3 stitches, and I meant to mention before that that first slip stitch counts as one of our stitches, okay? So bring your fingers through, sort of pinch it at the bottom with your pinky, come up under, go around and through and back through that thumb loop, okay? Let's do it a couple more times slowly and then we'll pick up speed. Okay, we're making our diamond shape. Go around the thumb, around the finger, and through that thumb loop. Once again, around the thumb, around the finger, and through that thumb loop. Around, around, and through. Around, around, and through. And I like to kind of tighten each time. Around, around, and through. And what we're going to do is keep going with this cast on. And you want to make sure you're casting on not too tightly. Sometimes that very first row or two of knitting can be a little bit snug. So just try not to make it super tight, okay? So I'm going to keep going on with my cast on until I have about 50, well, exactly 50 stitches. And then we're going to move on to row 1, okay? So let's see what we have so far. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and 22. So I'm going to keep going until I get to 50, and then we'll rejoin in just a moment. Okay, I now have 50 stitches on my needle. And what I like to do is grab my scissors and just give that tail a little trim. I always overestimate how much yarn I need, and you can save this in your scrap bin if you like. Okay, so now we can grab our other needle, and all we're going to do for rows 1 through 4 to get this bottom frame part of our dishcloth is to knit all the stitches. We're going to create a garter stitch border, okay? So what we're going to do, I'm going to do the first couple of knit stitches fairly slowly so you can see. If you are someone who already knows how to knit, then you can just, you know, make the first 4 rows of garter stitch. So what we're going to do is take the needle with the stitches in our left hand, the empty needle, if you will, in the right hand, and we're just going to insert the needle up under that left needle. Let me get a little bit of yarn here. Get our tail out of the way. We'll deal with that tail later. And then we're just going to wrap the yarn around the bottom needle and then slide the needle and bring it from the back and slide it up over the left needle now and then push it off. Okay, let's do that again. Insert the needle up under the left needle, wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, slide the bottom needle from the back to the front, and then push the stitch off. Next stitch, slide the needle up under the left needle, wrap the yarn around the right needle, slide it from back to front and push it off. Insert the needle, wrap the yarn around, slide the needle from the back to the top part and push it off. Okay, so all we're going to do is knit all the stitches all the way across, okay? Now if you're just starting with knitting, make sure you focus on accurately making the stitches, and as you make more and more and more and more stitches, the speed will come. And I admit lots of times in my videos I am a rather slow knitter. I'm much faster at crochet. So I like to take my time and kind of relax with the project and knit that way. Now that being said, if you are a continental knitter, you know, this might look a little bit different. If you prefer to knit that way, please feel free to do that as well. There are a lot of different ways in knitting to get yourself to the same point with casting on, binding off, how you hold your yarn, etc. Okay? So I'm trying not to keep things tight. I'm trying to keep them nice and loose so I can work with these stitches. When your stitches are really tight, it's hard to get the needle in there sometimes, okay? So I'm just going to knit all the way to the end of the row, and I'll take you with me through this first row, and then we'll do because the other rows are the same, we'll do those independently. Okay, so I'm just going to the end of this row here, and I really love this mercerized cotton. Is really interesting to work with. It has a very smooth pearly finish, and it's also commonly called pearl yarn because of that, or pearl cotton. So we're just knitting all the stitches. And I also wanted to mention too, if you're a beginner knitter and looking for different types of needles, I really love these bamboo needles for beginners because they sort of grip the yarn nicely. I found when I was learning how to knit, the metal needles were a little bit slippery for me with keeping my stitches on the needle. So bamboo needles are a wonderful knitting needle material, if you will. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the row. I'm just going to show you how to transition from one row to the next if you're not familiar with that. Okay, so we just have a few stitches left on our row here. Again, this is row 1. We're just taking this all the way to the end, and we're at the last stitch, okay? So I have row 1 finished. Row 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're just going to do the same thing. So just to get to the next row, in case you haven't done this before, we're going to switch needles. So we're going to put that needle that was in our right hand now is going to be in our left hand, and then you're ready to start again. So you're just going to knit all the stitches on this row 2. So row 2, knit all the stitches, row 3, knit all the stitches, and row 4, knit all the stitches. So I am going to continue with row 2, 3, and 4. And once I get to the end of those, we'll rejoin, and I'm going to show you how to work on this lace stitch here. Okay, so I just completed rows 1 through 4, and now I have this nice little frame for the bottom, like you can see here. The next part is going to be row 5. That's where we're going to begin this really pretty lace. And again, this is so super easy, but it gives a lot of pretty lacy texture. And it also makes some nice texture for some scrubbiness for your dishcloth as well. So all we're going to do, now we need to create the frames of the sides here as well. And that's created by just doing a knit 4. So knit the first 4 stitches of the row. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So that will create that little frame. The next thing we're going to do is get going on the lace. So what we want to do is do a yarn over. So we're just going to be, let me do that again. We're just going to be wrapping the yarn around the right needle only. Do a yarn over and then knit 2 together. So instead of sticking your needle under 1 stitch, you're going to stick your needle under 2 stitches and then proceed as normal. Okay? So wrap it around the bottom needle, slide it through from the back to the front like that, and push it off. Okay? So we're just going to repeat this sequence all the way across the row. I'm going to take you through the row and we'll do the whole thing together. So yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, all the way across until you only have 4 stitches remaining. Okay? Okay, so yarn over, knit 2 together. Sometimes it can be a little fiddly to go under 2 stitches like that, but just take your time, okay? Yarn over, knit 2 together. And just this simple little sequence makes all that pretty lace. Whoops, my scissors are caught up there. Yarn over, knit 2 together. Again, we're just doing this all the way across till the last 4 stitches. Yarn over, knit 2 together. When you're doing 2 stitches as well, it can also be a little bit snug to get your needle up under there. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. We're just going to continue all the way across. Okay, yarn over, knit 2 together, 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 yarn over, knit 2 together. You need to kind of push your work down a little bit too to sort of get it out of the way. That's helpful as well. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, all the way across, yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together, pushing it down. I like to push my work down every so often. Yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 2 together. Now we're coming up to those last 4 stitches, just so you know. Yarn over, knit 2 together, and now we're at the last 4. So the last 4, again, we're going to frame in our work. So we're going to just knit those last 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So row 5 is complete, and that was pretty simple. You know, give yourself some nice texture there. So all you're going to do, now let me grab our other project so I can show you. All you're going to do is repeat row 5 over and over and over until the width of your dishcloth is approximately the height, because we're going to get a square shape. So you can do this by sort of taking this corner and flipping it up to the top, making a triangle. If you flip it up and there's a lot of height here, that means you got a little bit more length to go. But just knit until row 5, until the height of your dishcloth is approximately the width. You can use a ruler and get more technical, but you can just kind of eyeball it like this as you work, okay? Now let me grab my other needle, because I'm going to show you how to finish up this dishcloth with this one that I've already had almost finished, okay? So let's take a closer look here. And I just wanted to mention as a side note, these little rubber caps I got from Knit Picks, I believe. They give you a whole handful of them, but you can keep them on the tips of your knitting needles to keep when you're not working on a project, or if you have to throw it in a tote bag or something. It'll keep all of your stitches onto your needle, and then you can just pull them off when you're ready to work. So that'll keep everything onto the needle. Okay? So what you're going to do is, once you've repeated row 5 over and over and over until you get the height that you need, we're going to simply just finish up the frame. So remember the 4 rows of knit stitches at the beginning that we did? We're going to repeat that up here. So once you're done repeating row 5, you're just going to repeat rows 1 through 4 once again to the top part of your dishcloth. Now, okay, so again, we're just repeating rows 1 through 4 once more, okay? So let me just show you the first row here. We're just knitting, knitting, knitting all the way across. So repeat rows 1 through 4 once more. We're going to do this all the way across. Now we just worked some lace on this row before this. So some of the stitches can be left leaning or right leaning. Some of them may feel looser if you did a yarn over or tighter, but we're just going to knit all of those stitches. Okay, that will give us a nice, neat border for our dishcloth and make it look framed and more finished looking. Okay, so we're just knitting all the way across, repeating rows 1 through 4 to finish up our dishcloth. Now, I am going to have you join me when we get to row 4 again, because those last few stitches, I'm going to show you the option of adding a hanging loop. So if you want to do a hanging loop on your dishcloth, proceed with rows 1 through 4, but when you get to the very end of row 4, leave 3 stitches on your needle, and we're going to grab the double pointed needles, and I will show you how to add that super easy hanging loop onto your dishcloth if you wish. If you don't, I'll show you how to finish off your dishcloth as well. Not everybody wants or needs a hanging loop on their dishcloth. Okay, so we're just knitting all the way across. So again, repeat rows 1 through 4, leaving those last 3 stitches at the end of row 4 if you'd like to do the hanging loop. So I'm going to add my rows and we'll rejoin in just a moment and proceed with the finishing up of our dishcloth. Okay, so I worked rows 1 through 4 and left 3 stitches for my hanging loop. Now again, if you don't want to do the hanging loop, you can simply just work to the end of the row. So what we're going to do now is take these 3 stitches and we're going to put them on a stitch marker. And we're going to work on those in just a bit, but first we need to bind off our stitches to finish up the other part. So go ahead and just put those on a little stitch marker. It's only 3 stitches, so you could use a safety pin. You don't need to really have a fancy stitch holder or anything like that. Okay, so then we're going to flip this over, and we'll just have these kind of hang out here for a minute. And then let's bind off all of these stitches here. Okay, so what we're simply going to do is knit a stitch, knit another stitch, and then take the stitch that you knitted first and lift it up with your left needle, lift it up, over, and off of your right needle, just like that. So then knit another stitch and then do the same thing. Take that stitch that's closest to you on your right needle, lift it up, over, and off. We're just going to do this all the way across. We can just slide this up as needed, and then just keep lifting it up, over, and across all the way over, and this will bind off the stitches. And again, if you want to skip that hanging loop, you can just do this for all the stitches and not worry about those last 3. Okay, so we're just doing this all the way across our row here, and we can kind of straighten things out as we work. So all you're going to do is knit a stitch and lift that other one up, over, and off. Okay, we're just going to do this all the way across. This is also a wonderful pattern if you have a hostess gift and you need to take a little something. If you're going to a family dinner or something like that, you can take something along. Or they make a wonderful housewarming gift for someone who might need to stock up their kitchen or bathroom with some pretty handmade things. So we're just lifting those stitches up, over, and off. And I would say we're about halfway through here. So I'm going to continue across. We're about halfway over, and then we'll rejoin in just a moment, and I'll show you how to finish this up on the end here and how we're going to deal with this hanging loop as well. Okay, so I'm just knitting that very last stitch on the row. I'm just going to lift it up, over, and off. So then you'll be left with 1 stitch. Let me just grab my scissors here. So what we're going to do is cut the yarn, leaving a tail. Then you can kind of like lift your needle up so it creates a loop, and then send that tail through that loop there. and then you'll want to get it nice and snug and tight to get that knot secure. So then the top part of our dishcloth is complete. So what we want to do now is grab our tapestry needle and we're going to weave in the end. Now you'll probably have another end down here to weave in, but I've already done that. So just have this one last tail. So you can just take that just up under some of these stitches. I'm going to go down. You can also go across. And just get that woven in so it's tucked out of the way. And then just trim the tail. And then your dishcloth, if you're not doing the hanging loop, would be complete at this point. And it looks very pretty. So let's figure out what to do with this hanging loop. So we have our 3 stitches. So what I'm going to do is, now we don't have, our yarn is not connected to our project anymore, so we need to reattach it. So grab your double pointed needles at this point. We're going to switch our tools a little bit. So we're done with the straight needles. And so what we're going to do is very carefully take this stitch marker off, and we're going to slip our double pointed needle onto our stitches here, okay? So just very carefully do that, and then just let it hang out for a second. And then we're going to take our yarn, and we're going to attach it to this first loop here, okay? So you can just kind of like tuck it in there and just tie it right on. You might need to get your other needle to help you out a little bit, just to kind of pull it through, okay? So I'm just going to simply tie it on. Now, I want to say when I do crochet, I always say there's different ways to tie yarn on, and the same thing goes here. If you want to do something a little bit different, that's perfectly fine too. Okay, so we're going to leave this tail alone for now. We're just going to grab the working yarn in our hand and our other double pointed needle. So all you're going to do is simply knit the first 3 stitches. We're going to be, like I mentioned before, we're going to be making an I-cord. An I-cord is a smooth, cylindrical rope-like piece. If we were to knit this in rows traditionally, you would get a flat piece of ribbon more so than a cylinder, okay? If you'd like to do that, you can also, of course, do that as well. But we're going to do the I-cord. So insert the hook or the needle into the first stitch. I was just talking about crochet, so I mentioned a hook. So go ahead and knit those first 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. Now the magic of the I-cord is what happens next. If you've never knitted an I-cord, this is really interesting. Instead of flipping your work like you normally would, you're going to push it down to the other end of your double pointed needle. That's why having double pointed needles is so important. And then you're going to continue to knit your stitches. You're just going to keep doing this until you have a couple inches of I-cord, enough to make a hanging loop. So let's do this a couple more times together. Knit 3, whoops, there we go. Knit 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3. And then you're going to slide your needle down, or your stitches rather, down to the other end of your work. And then you're going to keep doing this. 1, 2, 3. You can already see it starting to form. Slide it down to the other end of the needle and do the same thing. 1, 2, and 3. Slide it down to the end of the needle. And then just keep doing this over and over until you get a little bit of length on your I-cord. And this is a really nice sturdy hanging loop as well. So you can see it's making this cylindrical like rope. Okay, let's do a few more together and then we'll knit some I-cord on our own too. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Slide your work down, grab the other DPN, and then just keep doing this all the way across. All right, so I'm going to keep working on my I-cord until I get enough to make a nice loop. And then we'll rejoin in just a moment, and I'm going to show you how to finish this off. Okay, I worked my I-cord for about 4 inches, and I did a little test here and there as I was working it, just to kind of fold it over to see what I liked. And I liked the 4-inch length. Okay, so what we want to do now is bind off our I-cord. All we're going to do for that is to simply just bind off as you normally would, okay? So knit 2 stitches, the same thing we did before, and then we're going to just lift it up, over, and off, knit the next stitch, whoops, lift it up, over, and off, and then our I-cord will be finished. You can give it a little tug to kind of straighten everything out. Okay, so once again, cut your yarn. Pull that loop up a little bit just to be able to send this tail through. And then you're just gonna pull that in nice and snug. Just kind of like pull it down like that. So I-cords are funny because you have to weave the tail in kind of through the middle of it. But, oh, you know what? Actually, let's leave this tail on because we need to sew this down. And that tail, we can just use that instead of cutting a new piece. So that makes that nice and handy. But we do need to weave this end in where we joined our yarn earlier. So just weave that in and end in really quickly. Just come up under the stitches. Same thing we did before. Pull it in one direction and just kind of tuck it in there and trim your yarn. Okay, let's grab our tapestry needle again, and we will thread it again. And this is completely reversible, so it doesn't really matter where you sew it. But bring your other end, let me get this part out of the way. There we go. Now we can see better. Bring the other end in and kind of fold it over like that. And we're just going to tack it down right at the base of the I-cord where we began. Okay? So you can just kind of hold it in place. And then we're just going to go through both the base of the I-cord and this other end with our tapestry needle. We're going through a lot of stitches, so if you need to kind of like wiggle your needle back and forth, that's okay. Okay, so we're just going to go through both pieces here a couple of times. We don't want to overstitch it because when you overstitch it, it makes it sort of lumpy looking. But if you understitch it, it won't be secure and it could pull apart. Okay, so just a few stitches is all it's going to take. And you can give it a little tug to kind of test it out as well. Okay, then what I like to do is once you've put a couple of stitches in there, send your needle through one more time, leaving a loop. Like that. See how I left a loop? And then send your needle through that loop to create a knot. And you can just kind of like knot it off like that. Okay? Now we have a tail. Once again, this is the very last tail of our project. So just thread your tapestry needle and then just send it through there. And then we can grab our scissors and trim. And our dishcloth is complete. Actually, my end is sticking out. Let me just, I didn't trim my end flush enough. There we go. Okay, so our dishcloth is complete and you can kind of straighten everything out. You can block this, but this is going to be a hard-working kitchen item, so it's going to get used and wet and dipped in water anyway. So this is our textured lace dishcloth. It looks very pretty. It was super easy to make, and I hope you enjoy this project as well. I really enjoyed working up this lace. It was really fun to make. So that's it. That's the textured lace dishcloth. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.